everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Christine. I like to read dark and disturbing things, and today's video is going to be about winter reads. That could be winter horror, it could be winter thriller, or just winter fantasy. So let's check it out. So I thought I would start off this video with talking about a few wintry books that I've read in the past. So in case you haven't read them, you can check them out. And at the end, I will talk about some of the wintry books that I plan on reading this winter. I think that winter might be my favorite season after fall because it is perfect for isolation horror. It's perfect for survival horror. I always find that the isolation is very believable because it's something that can happen quite easily depending on where you live. And there's just something about the beauty of snow mixed with horror. I mean, first of all, snow kind of makes everything sound, it affects the sounds around us. So if you scream, someone is less likely to hear you just because all those sounds are muffled. And just that blood splashing on snow has quite a great visual to me. So let's first talk about some of the books that I've already read in the past during the winter season, or ones that remind me of being in the snow and being cold. And of course, I'm gonna have to bring up Stephen King. First of all, he has a couple novels that are perfect for this snowy kind of setting. And the first one is one of my favorites. It's called Misery. This is a different cover than I'm used to seeing, but this is the one that I happen to own. If somehow you haven't come across Misery yet, it is a book about an author who is driving in the snow when he has a horrible accident kind of in the middle of nowhere. And when he wakes up, he finds that he is in the care of a person who found him, and she has him in her cabin, and she happens to have been a nurse. So she says she's going to take good care of him while he heals. And anyway, they can't get out right now because they are snowed in. Turns out that this person that found him is an obsessive fan of his, and things just get crazy from there. This one I read a few years ago, and I have already, I knew the story, I have seen the movie, but this one still really hit me hard because it can really dive into the thoughts of our main character. I think that Stephen King wrote the addiction in this very well, as our character becomes addicted to pain pills while he's being cared for. And I just didn't really know what was coming next. And it was a little bit scarier to read the book, I thought, than watch the movie, but they are both excellent. The other Stephen King book I would be remiss to not mention is The Shining. I think we all know the story, but in case you don't, it is about a small family, a husband, a wife, and their young son. They go to this isolated hotel on the top of a mountain, and it is the father's job to take care of the hotel as being like a caretaker during the winter months while they're closed. So he's just kind of making sure that, like, if a pipe bursts or something like that happens, that he's there to take care of it. Again, we have our isolation, which makes it a lot more creepy, and slowly our main character starts to kind of lose his mind while he is in this very isolated setting, and his family has to deal with what's going on. It's not a favorite of mine. I know it's a favorite of a lot of people, but I think that by the time I read it, it had been hyped up so much that I already kind of knew a lot of the scenes and a lot of the stories, but it's still a great read. Next is a book I read just last year, and that is All the White Spaces by Wilkes. This was my first time reading from this author, and this is a story about a man named Jonathan who hops aboard a ship as a stowaway for an Antarctic expedition. And while the ship is out, a disaster strikes and they end up stranded on this piece of land that is uninhabited by anybody, and it is, below freezing temperatures, and they need to survive until somebody else happens to come along, which is unlikely, or that they are able to fix their ship to get out of the situation. And things kind of get crazy from there. This one is for sure a slow burn, and it is a little bit on the thicker side, But if you like a slow burn polar horror, this one will be for you. I didn't know how I'd feel about it, but I was surprised at how into this book I was. I really, really enjoyed it. I found, when you're trapped with a group of people and you're in this crazy situation, people are going to kind of all react differently anyway. But when people start to kind of lose their minds and you don't really know who you can trust, can you trust your own self? Can you trust the others that are with you? It gets really, really scary. Next up is a book called Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. Philip Fracassi was one of my favorite authors last year, and actually I really need to read more of his work because some of the ones I read last year were my favorite. Like I said, I think I read 3 of his books last year. Boys in the Valley is probably his most popular of those books. And the reason I bring it up is because it does take place in the winter time where they are isolated in this very cold setting. This is about an orphanage that one night some travelers visit because one of their people are wounded, and while they are trying to be being cared for, something happens that seems to unleash some sort of evil into this orphanage, and it starts to affect how everybody is acting. Our boys are helpless, not only because they are isolated by this winter, but also they are under the care of the priests at this orphanage and they can't just do what they please. So this one is very cold, creepy. It really drives home what it's like to be hungry and cold and having no control. So I do recommend this one. This one was a 4-star read for me. The next book is a book I don't own, but I did read it last year, and that is The Shuddering by Ania Ahlborn. This is an author that has been kind of hit or miss for me, but I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed Brother by this author as well. These are like the standout reads for me. This particular book is a book about a group of, I think, young adults that go out to stay at a secluded cabin in the Colorado mountains. And it's kind of like their last hurrah. I think after this, they're graduating or going off to start new careers, something like that. So they're really wanting to party it up and have a good time. Of course, a massive blizzard hits them and they are now stranded in this house. And it seems like there may be something outside the house that is trying to get them. I had a really good time with this one and I gave it 4 stars. Another one that I read last year was Snow by Ronald Malfi. This is a story about a man who is trying to get back home to see his son on Christmas Eve. This is something he promised his son, that he doesn't get to see his son very often, and he has made this promise that he will see him on Christmas Day. Of course, there is a big blizzard and all the flights are canceled. It is not safe to be traveling, not by plane, not by anything, but he really cannot let his son down again. So he rents a car, and another woman at the airport who's very desperate to be getting where she needs to go is going in the same direction, and as well as I believe an older couple, and they all decide to carpool and make this trip. The roads are so dangerous. The roads are crazy icy. They can hardly see anything on the road, but they end up getting kind of flagged down on the side of the road at some point, and there is a man and his daughter just kind of wandering out on the side of the road. And this kind of leads them to this town that is completely deserted, and something very mysterious and creepy is happening in this abandoned town. This is one that I really, really loved the intro to the book. I was very invested in this character, in this story of him trying to get to his son, and the weather and everything that was written so well. It did kind of lose me a little bit towards the end, but that might just be a me thing. So I think it was like a 3.5-star read for me, but decide for yourself and give it a shot. I've also read a couple thrillers that are like isolated, wintry vibes. So I thought I would talk about those briefly, even though I'm not a huge like thriller reader. I do enjoy a thriller from time to time. The first one is The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This is about a writer who is trying to really prove her worth. She has been in a writing slump for a year, and she gets this opportunity to go to a writing retreat with her favorite author. And her favorite author picks like a handful of women who she wants to kind of take under her wing and really help them refine their writing. So they have this retreat, and every day they have exercises where they have to write so many words. Our main character is so excited. She can't believe she has this opportunity, But it turns out that her ex-best friend is also at this retreat, who happens to be a writer, and something happened in their past that really, where they had a falling out, and we don't really know what that is. So we're kind of they're being forced into these close confines where they have to get along, or either get along and ignore each other, or face the music and kind of hash it out. Of course, it happens to snow, and they are already isolated because they're supposed to be in a space where they're not on their phones, they're not on the internet, they're just focused on their writing, and things start going sideways, and there's a couple twisty turnies in here. I personally had a good time with this. I don't read a lot of thrillers, so I thought it was fast-paced and fun. Seems like people seem to love it or really dislike it. Another winter thriller that I have to mention, even though probably everyone has read this one by now, is No Exit by Taylor Adams. So this was actually probably one of the first thrillers I really ever read, and I absolutely loved it. And because it was such a great book and it was 5 stars and everyone seems to really enjoy this one, it's kind of hard because I hold all other thrillers up to this one. This one's about a young woman who is going to visit, I believe, her mom, who is on her deathbed, and there is a blizzard while she's driving out back home, and the roads are going to be closed up ahead. She has no choice but to pull over at a rest stop and wait out the storm until the roads are clear again. When she gets to this rest stop, there are several other people already there that have been there before her, and there's no cell signal, nothing like that. So they're kind of forced in these confines where they're kind of talking to each other, getting to know each other, playing cards, just kind of wasting time. At some point, our main character goes back to her car to get something, and she notices that in the vehicle that's parked next to her, it's a van that has a kidnapped young girl in the back of the car. She notices that this girl is tied up and gagged, and she can't do anything to help her at this moment. And she doesn't want to give away that she knows what's going on. So she has to go back into the rest stop, pretend everything is okay, try to find some way to save this girl, save herself, and figure out who the heck is it that has this girl in the back of her van. This one was actually made into a movie, which I quite enjoyed. Of course, I always think the book is a little better, but by the time I saw the movie, I already knew where it was going, so that's not really fair. But this was a great one, and I really loved it. It had my heart thumping while I was reading it. So the next couple books I'm going to talk about are actually holiday horror books. I wanted to kind of keep this separate just in case you weren't really into the holiday thing, because when I say holiday, let's face it, they all end up being kind of Christmassy. So the first one I have is Secret Santa by Andrew Schaefer. I mean, can we appreciate this cover? This one I read quite a few years ago, so I don't know that I remember completely what's going on with this, but this one is about a woman who is really trying to find a job at a publishing company, and she kind of gets the job because she shows up for an interview, and the man that goes to interview her actually just drops dead in the middle of the interview, and so I guess she gets the job. She gets this job right around Christmas time in December, and they're having a Secret Santa exchange. And she ends up with this gift that kind of unleashes this terror throughout her building, and accidents start happening, and she needs to kind of figure out a way to stop that. This one reminded me very much of like an 80s horror flick that doesn't take itself too seriously, but has some good kills in it. Speaking of good kills, we have Candy Cane Kills from Brian McCauley. This is part of the Killer VHS series. This came out last year, and if you saw my TBR video for December, I plan on reading the sequel in December, and I'm very excited about it. This is a short little novella, and this is about a small family, mother, father, son, and daughter, who are kind of going through a rough family patch. I think the parents aren't getting along too well, and they decide that they're going to make a Merry Christmas for everybody and really force this family fun time together. So they rent a cabin, and it turns out that maybe some things happened in this cabin in the past, maybe some murders. They don't know this, but everywhere they go in town, everyone's kind of treating them a little weird when they find out where they're staying, and it's kind of making them feel uneasy. One night they are looking for some games or something in the house, and they've come across this old VHS tape. They pop it in, and it turns out that they are uncovering the secrets of what happened in this house before it turned into a rental, and it's not the greatest. This one is just a fun slasher using holiday theming, and our main character is Candy Cane, and she has some revenge to seek. It was a super fun time. I felt like even for a slasher, they did give the characters some kind of arc throughout this. We had disability rep that was done in what I thought was a pretty good way. And I just overall had a really fun time with this. I can't wait to read part 2. Next is a group of short stories. And if I'm being honest, I think that the cover is way better than the content. But of course, I have to mention this because look at this cover. This is Hark the Herald Angels Scream, edited by Christopher Golden, and we've got short stories from all kinds of authors there. I have to admit, I'm not the biggest short story person, so maybe I'm not the person to comment on this. I found the stories just kind of okay. Most of them were forgettable, but that's just me. So if you're looking for some short stories to read and something with an amazing cover, it might be in your best interest to check this out yourself, but I just wanted to mention this one. A novella I read last year is Snowball, a Christmas horror story by Andre Gonzalez. This is a short one. It's under 150 pages, and it is about a family who finds this elf on a shelf, I think at like a donation shop or in a donation shop or a garage sale, something like that. This is like an older, pre-loved elf on the shelf. And the mom brings it home, and it is creepy as hell looking already, but she insists that they start putting this elf on the shelf. And yeah, this is like kind of like Child's Play, but with an elf on the shelf. It is just a fun slasher with a creepy ass elf, which I think Elf on a Shelf is creepy enough. I was not part of that generation that had that, and I am kind of glad, and I nipped that in the bud. That was never a thing in my house for my son either. But if you want to see a little elf on a shelf running around stabbing people, this is the one for you. Another book that I thought I owned, but I actually don't. I have quite a few Brom books, but I don't own this one, and that is Krampus the Yule Lord. I read this one quite a few years ago. It was actually my first Brom book, and this was just a really fun story set in modern days, but with these ancient beings coming into modern times. And this is about the story of Krampus and his beef with Santa, as well as our main character who's kind of this down on his luck guy who doesn't make the best decisions, but his intentions are good. And he's just trying to make a nice Christmas for his daughter. He has no money. He has no idea how he's going to do that. And all of a sudden he stumbles into finding this Santa sack that anything you think about, when you reach in and pull it out, that item will appear. And that is how the magic of Santa works, by the way, in case you didn't know. Well, him stumbling upon the Santa sack just kind of starts this whole adventure of crime and lore, Christmas lore, and it's really interesting to see Santa in a new light, as well as Miss Claus, and it's good. I don't even know how to describe it. Actually, I should reread that one because it's been a few years and I don't own it. But also it's got some great artwork in it, like all of Brom's books, but this one has like a Santa daddy in it. If you really want to see Santa in a new light, this is the book for you. The last of the books that I have read, I won't talk too much about this one because it was in my TBR video, because I'm rereading it this December, and that is Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I do think that this could be read outside of Christmas, and if you're not really a big Christmas person, that doesn't really impact you because the story takes place over many years. It's not really just a Christmas book, but our villain in this book is stealing children and bringing them to this place called Christmas Land. While most of this book does not take place in Christmas Land, it does have that aspect to it. But yeah, I talk about it more in my December TBR, and I will be talking about it with the book club, the Fright Club, which I am a co-host for, and I will link our Discord down below because we are reading this in December. Now I just wanted to talk about some of the books that I plan on reading this winter. I did already talk about my December TBR, so I won't go over those again. Those are all mainly Christmas horror books or Christmas related books. These are going to be more wintry reads. The first one, I didn't really think about it as a wintry book, but I've seen it mentioned as such, and I do believe it just takes place in winter I forget where this one takes place, but this is a movie I've seen before. It's called Let the Right One In, or I think it also goes by the title Let Me In, depending on where you purchase this book. This is a vampire book with kids, creepy vampire kids, I believe. If I remember the story very loosely, I'm going to go into this blind because I hear it can be quite bleak. But this one is about a little boy just living his life, and someone comes to his window and he kind of becomes friends with this little girl, and she turns out to be a vampire. I could have their genders wrong. I could be completely wrong. It's been a very long time since I saw the movie, but I want to go into this as blind as I can since I've seen the movie. Next is another polar horror read by Wilkes, and this one is called Where the Dead Wait. And this one honestly sounds a lot like All the White Spaces. It says, in the 1800s, there's many ways to get lost in the Arctic. There are fewer ways to be found, but a disgraced sea captain must search for a shipmate and his own redemption amidst icy threats from within and without, in Bram Stoker nominated author Ali Wilkes' chiller polar gothic novel. That's all I know. It sounds a lot like the other one, and I really like the other one, so why not? This one has been on quite a few TBRs. I don't know what my problem is. That is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. I don't even remember what it's about anymore. I just know it takes place in winter. Look at, we've got all these trees on the inside to prove it. So it sounds like this is about two people living alone in the mountains, and all of a sudden they start finding like mutilated bodies of animals, and they know that there is something out there to get them. That's all I know. I swear I am reading this one this winter. I must, because I will feel too dumb to have it on a TBR and not get to it again. Speaking of, I might as well just mention this one, Rotophones by Christopher Golden. Same situation, been on a few TBRs. It's not even that long. The other one's not long either. I'm not going to get into it because I've probably talked about this one like 3 times. Next are 2 books I've not talked about before, and the first one is book 2 in a series, and I read the first book last month or the month before. This is from the Small Spaces Quartet. This is Dead Voices by Catherine Arden, and this one takes place in the winter. So we're following the same group of kids that we did in the first one, and this one says they're ready for a relaxing winter break skiing with their parents at Mount Hemlock Resort. A snowstorm sets in, causing the power to flicker out and cold to creep closer and closer. The trio of friends begin to see and hear chilling, spooky things. Their fun-filled trip is quickly turned into another terrifying encounter with another dimension. I'm just going to cut it off there because I think if I read more, it will be maybe a spoiler from the first book. This is a middle grade book, and I really enjoyed the first one. So since this one takes place in winter, there's no reason not to read this one. Another book that I got from a book box, and it is probably unlike anything I would have just picked up, but look how cute this is. This is an independently published book, and this one's small. This one's called Polar Opposites. To me, that sounds like it's going to be a romance, but then when you read the back, the very first line says, ever since I was little, unusual things have happened around me, but nothing quite as strange as a wild polar bear coming to my rescue and telling me I'm a witch. I don't even need to know anything else besides that line, and that's what I'm going in with. And then the last 3 books, I'm not entirely sure are winter books, but I think I was watching Kelsey's video, and I believe she mentioned that this one takes place in winter, and that's Schrader's Chord by Scott Lead. Since I'm trying to read the books I already own, I pulled this one off my shelf to put in my pile of possibilities. The next one, I don't even think it's a winter book, but the cover always makes me think of winter. It's The Watchers by A.M. Shine. This one has also been on several TBRs, and I'm embarrassed that I haven't read it yet. So I think it has something to do with being in the dark forest and whatever. To me, that reminds me of winter, and I'm going with it. And last but not least is the second book in the Bear and the Nightingale series by Catherine Arden, who is also the author of that middle grade book I mentioned. I read The Bear and the Nightingale, I think 2 years ago, which takes place in a very cold, wintry scene. And I'm not sure if the second book will do the same, probably, but I really want to get to the second book in the series, and that is The Girl in the Tower. And these are like kind of like Russian folklore-y type books. They are fantasy, but the first one I really did enjoy. and hopefully I remember enough from it to read the second book okay. Okay, I know there's more books that I'm probably leaving out, but that is what I'm working with right now. I hope I mentioned some that maybe you were not familiar with or weren't sure about, and then you decide to pick them up. You'll have to let me know how you like them. For now, I am just ready for it to snow. Don't hate me, but I love snow. I love being warm inside. I don't like driving in snow, but I do like being warm inside and cozy with my blanket and a book while it is all crazy outside. I do live where there's lots of evergreen trees, so seeing them covered in snow is always very beautiful. So you'll have to let me know down below, what is your favorite wintry read? It doesn't have to be horror, it can be anything. Fantasy, even romance, I'll take it. I will allow it. But let me know your favorite down below in case it's one I haven't read so I can check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay spooky.